A ragged little boy tugged at the sleeve of a millionaire, pointing toward an old, rusted hatch in the middle of a dry, barren field. And what emerged after that hatch was opened left the millionaire frozen in place. "He's down there, my brother." Noah, a frail boy of about 8, stood silently in the scorched field. His threadbare shirt was worn thin at the shoulders. One bony finger pointed toward a rusted metal hatch half hidden in the yellowing weeds. Not long before that moment, Noah had stood for hours by the side of a dusty country road, holding an old photograph. Cars had sped by one after another, kicking up clouds of red dust. No one stopped. No one looked back. One woman finally did pull over. She pressed a few coins into his hand. Noah shook his head and said softly, "I'm not asking for money." Startled, she asked what he meant. Noah raised the photograph and pointed out across the empty field. "My brother's alive. I'm looking for him." She chuckled awkwardly and drove off, leaving Noah alone with the sound of her engine fading into the distance. A middle-aged man had once muttered, "Sure, kid. Maybe he's up on Mars. I'm still looking for the years I lost to my 20s. Then he walked away. No one took what Noah said seriously. But this time was different. A sleek black car came to a stop. The window rolled down slowly. The man inside didn't speak right away. He just looked at the boy. His name was Nathaniel Grayson, a once celebrated entrepreneur in educational technology, a self-made millionaire. But after his daughter's sudden death, he walked away from everything. He'd been driving across states ever since, avoiding familiar faces and old obligations. A hole had opened in his life, one for which he'd never found words. When Nathaniel first saw Noah, thin frame, dark circles under his eyes, but standing tall, he didn't understand why he didn't just drive on like everyone else. Maybe it was because the boy didn't ask for anything. Or maybe it was something in that boy's eyes that made him stop. But it wasn't just that. Nathaniel saw the old photograph Noah held in his hands. He noticed the way those tiny fingers clung to it, tight, desperate, like it was the last thread tying him to this world. And in that moment, an image flashed across Nathaniel's mind, sharp and painful. Sylvia Grayson, his daughter. She'd once had an old rag doll, worn, frayed, falling apart. But it had been her whole world. She never let it out of her sight. An inanimate object, yes, but sacred to her. The way Noah held that photograph, that steady, almost unreal determination on his face, it stirred something deeply familiar in Nathaniel. It wasn't just sympathy. It was a pull, a strange, aching intuition that something important, something he couldn't afford to ignore, was unfolding. He didn't know why he stopped, but he knew he had to. Noah looked Nathaniel in the eyes, then pointed at the rusty hatch hidden in the grass. "My brother, he's down there." His voice was soft, but steady, brimming with quiet, unwavering belief. Nathaniel didn't respond right away. He turned his head to follow the boy's gesture. There, in the middle of the scorched earth, surrounded by brittle grass and stubble, lay a forgotten iron hatch, weather-beaten and almost swallowed by the land. "What did you say?" "My brother's under there. Eli. I've heard him. Through the hatch. I know he's there." "What's your name?" "Noah." Nathaniel studied him for a long moment. The boy's eyes were dry. No tears, but the gaze they held was strangely fierce, far too resolute for someone so young. "Why do you think your brother's under that thing?" "I don't think. I know. I've been here 3 days. Every morning I knock. Every morning I hear 3 knocks back." Silence fell. Nathaniel looked around. No houses, no people, just red dust, hardened ground, and a scrawny child calmly asserting what sounded like madness. without the slightest trace of doubt in his voice. "Let me see the picture." Noah held it out. Nathaniel took it, hands trembling slightly, and just for a second, an old memory stirred. A similar photograph, his daughter, Sylvia, standing with her best friend at summer camp, hand in hand. Grinning, their smiles caught just before they bloomed into laughter. Nathaniel inhaled slowly and returned the photo. Then he stepped toward the hatch. The iron surface was coarse, rusted, scratched by time. He knelt down and tapped on it. 3 times. 1, 2, 3. Silence. Then, after a few long seconds, seconds that seemed to stretch like a hot summer afternoon with no breeze, 3 faint knocks answered back. Software barely there, but real. Nathaniel's brow furrowed. He rose slowly, eyes fixed on the hatch. Something stirred in his chest, not just from the sound below, but from within. A feeling he hadn't let surface in years. Something like sorrow finally catching its breath. "Come here, Noah. Help me." Nathaniel tried again. Noah grabbed a rock and began striking the opposite edge. Together, they strained, breathing hard, sweat forming. Nathaniel's back began to ache, but he didn't stop. A minute passed. 2. Still no movement. Nathaniel paused, panting. He looked at the boy. "I think we'll need help. Is there anyone nearby?" Noah thought for a moment. "Mr. Isaac. He's a farmer around here. I've seen him a few times, but I'm the only one who knows where he lives. His house has a red roof, way at the end of the field." Nathaniel exhaled. "Lead the way." Noah nodded and started walking. Nathaniel followed behind, a heaviness in his steps. And echoing in his mind were those 3 soft knocks, gentle as wind, but powerful enough to awaken something that had long been buried in his soul. Isaac's house sat tucked into a patch of open land, surrounded by a leaning wooden fence and the twisted stumps of old trees. Smoke rose gently from the chimney, thin and bluish. The smell of burning wood drifted through the air, earthy and warm. Noah stepped forward and knocked on the door. After a moment, it creaked open, revealing a tall man with a patchy beard, deep-set eyes, and a guarded expression. "My name's Noah," the boy said quickly. "This is Mr. Grayson. We need help." The man didn't answer right away. His eyes scanned Nathaniel, then dropped to his mud-stained shoes. "Another one of the town's wild goose chases?" Nathaniel stepped forward, extending his hand. "I'm Nathaniel Grayson. We believe there's a child trapped underground, in a hatch out in the field." "A hatch? A child?" The man, clearly Isaac, let out a short, dry laugh. "I've lived here 20 years. There's no hatch out there. You two pulling my leg?" Noah reached into his pocket and pulled out the photo, holding it to his chest. "My brother's down there. Eli. I've heard him. For days." Isaac stared at the boy, eyes lingering on the photo, then flicking over to Nathaniel. "And you believe this?" Nathaniel hesitated. "I can't explain it. But I heard 3 knocks. From below, clear as day. They came back, exactly the same. Could be a drainage pipe. Could be an animal. Kids from town play tricks like that all the time," Isaac snapped. "And grown men shouldn't be encouraging this kind of nonsense." "I understand," Nathaniel replied, his voice softening. "But if there's even a 1% chance someone's really down there, we might save a life. It won't take long." Isaac stared at him for a long time. Then, without a word, he turned and walked back inside. A minute later, he returned with a shovel slung over his shoulder. "Let's go. But I'm telling you now, if this is a hoax, I'm calling the police." No one said a word on the walk from town. Nathaniel kept a composed face, but his jaw was tight, his grip firm on the crowbar Isaac had handed him. Isaac followed behind, his back hunched, weighed down more by doubt than by age. And Noah led the way, silent, his eyes holding a strange glow. Not blind hope, but a stubborn conviction, sharpened by years of searching alone. When they reached the spot, Nathaniel placed the crowbar at the edge of the iron hatch. He looked at Noah, then at Isaac. No words were exchanged. All three drew a deep breath. The two men put their full weight into the first lift. The metal screeched, dry and jarring like a blade slicing through silence. Red dust and flakes of rust burst into the air, spattering Nathaniel's sleeves. The hatch was unbelievably heavy, like time itself had joined forces to keep it shut. They paused to catch their breath, then continued. Nathaniel's wrists began to tremble, but he didn't stop. Finally, with a heavy groan, the lid cracked open at one corner. A gust of cold air burst out, thick, damp, foul, with the scent of decay. Nathaniel froze. His face went pale, his eyes fixed on the darkness below, as though afraid of what they might pull up from it. But Noah didn't hesitate. He crouched, flashlight in hand, fingers shaking. The beam cut into the blackness. A faint breath, a soft exhale, rose through the musty air, fragile enough to be mistaken for nothing. Then, from the edge of shadow, a dried, dust-covered hand reached up, scraped and trembling, clutching the rim of the hatch. The motion was weak, barely more than a whisper. Isaac stood frozen, his face slackened, eyes wide. "Dear God," he muttered, barely audible. At the bottom of the hatch lay a child, or what was left of one. So thin the skin clung to bone, clothes in tatters, hair matted with sweat and dust. The skin was pale, ashen, dusted with a layer of grey like cold soot. It was no longer the body of childhood, but something worn down and forgotten. Those eyes, lost, wild, scanned the space, then locked on the beam of light. When Eli saw Noah, a tiny flicker sparked in his gaze, so small it could have gone unnoticed, unless you'd been waiting 2 years to see it. Noah didn't scream. He didn't cry. But when Eli's hand touched his, the tears came. Hot, quiet, unstoppable. He bit his lip, trying not to sob aloud. "I'm here," Noah whispered. Not a statement, but a song. A quiet tune just for Eli, for himself, and for the journey no one believed in. His voice was softer than the wind. Eli strained upward, a clumsy motion, like someone who had forgotten how to use their limbs. He gripped his brother's hand and let out a broken sob, the first sound in 2 years. Not a cry of pain, but of release. Nathaniel was frozen in place. He hardly dared to breathe. The lump in his throat rose not from shock, but from regret, a slow burning regret he hadn't known until now. He'd doubted this boy. He'd nearly driven off when Noah had held out that picture under the cracked sun and dusty wind. And now, that same hand held a real, living child. A truth that could no longer be denied. The sorrow didn't weaken him, it humbled him. In his mind, Sylvia's face surfaced. That same frightened look from childhood. The way she had touched his hand one last time before leaving this world. A quiet crack ran through Nathaniel's chest, not from pain, but from something deeper. Shame. Isaac sank to his knees, not from exhaustion, but because he could no longer stand. "We've got to get him out," he whispered. Nathaniel nodded, voice low and rough, like stone scraped across stone. "Careful. Don't hurt him." He knelt and slid his arms under Eli. The boy was weightless, barely there, yet Nathaniel's hands shook as he lifted him from the hatch. The torn shirt revealed bruises across the shoulders and down the back, some dried, some oozing. Isaac saw them and covered his mouth. He'd never seen starvation like this. Eli clung to Nathaniel's hand as he was lifted, then turned and reached for Noah. Their fingers locked. Neither let go. When Nathaniel looked back at Noah, he was stunned. The boy's legs were streaked with cuts, dried blood caked along them. His shirt was torn, sun-blistered across the back. "How far did you walk?" Nathaniel asked quietly. "From the old town," Noah rasped. "Every day, a little farther." Isaac gasped. "We've got to get to a hospital. Now." "Get in the car," Nathaniel said, no room for argument in his voice. "Isaac, help me with him." The car roared down the road. In the back seat, Eli lay in Noah's lap. His fingers still clutched the photo, two children holding each other, wrinkled but whole. His eyes were nearly closed, but at the corner of his mouth, a tiny smile. The sky turned violet as the sun disappeared behind the fields, and for the first time in 2 years, light fell on that boy. Not just any light, but a light that touched parts of the world everyone thought had long since rotted away. At the city hospital, the afternoon faded like any other, with the clack of hurried heels, the rhythmic roll of hospital bed wheels, and rushed footsteps echoing down long, sterile hallways. Everything moved with the practiced flow of a familiar soundtrack. But inside the room where Eli lay, time had come to a halt, held in place by a pain too deep for words. Eli curled up on his side, his back to the room, eyes shut tight. He wouldn't eat, wouldn't speak, didn't react to the sounds around him. Each time Nurse Emily reached to change his bandages, he flinched, as if bracing for a blow. Emily never asked questions. She simply cleaned and dressed the wounds, pressing a gentle hand to his forehead like a wordless promise of comfort. His body bore layers of bruises and cuts, some deep, carefully bandaged, others left to time and healing. Noah sat beside the bed, his gaze fixed on his brother. He still wore the same blood and dirt-stained clothes from the field. His legs were blistered, his hands scraped raw from the long journey, but he didn't seem to notice. Every breath Eli took drew Noah closer, as if looking away might mean losing him all over again. Nathaniel Grayson stood in the doorway, keeping his distance. He watched the brothers in silence, heart clenched at the thought of Eli trapped in that dark pit for 2 whole years. He saw Noah gripping his brother's hand with quiet resolve, his face pale from exhaustion, but his eyes unwavering. "You holding up okay, Noah?" Nathaniel asked softly. Noah looked up. "I'm okay. But Eli?" Nathaniel nodded, his voice firm. "We'll do everything we can to help Eli recover." At that moment, Nurse Selena stepped into the room. She glanced at the chart, Eli Torres, and froze. "Is that really Eli Torres?" she asked, her voice shaking. Noah nodded. "Yes, his name is Eli Torres." Selena pulled out her phone and quickly typed a message to her sister. "Maria, get to the hospital right away. Eli Torres is here." Less than an hour later, Maria Torres, once the boy's schoolteacher, arrived. Rain still clung to her coat as she knocked gently on the door. When she stepped in, her eyes fell on Noah. "Miss Maria?" Noah whispered. Maria rushed forward, brushing his hair back, then turned to Eli. Her breath caught at the bruises lining his neck. "It's really you two," she choked out. Memories of unheeded warnings, ignored reports, and unanswered pleas came rushing back. Nathaniel stepped forward. "I'm Nathaniel Grayson. I helped bring them here." Maria spoke gently. "I'm Maria Torres, their former teacher." "Thank you, Mr. Grayson. Without you..." Nathaniel knelt down beside Noah. "Noah, is there anything you want to tell me about what happened to Eli?" Noah hesitated. "I asked about my brother. They told me to mind my own business, but I didn't believe them." "Who, Noah? Who told you that?" "Victor Lane, my uncle. He split us up, said Eli went away to school, but I knew that wasn't true." Noah's voice dropped. "At first we still shared a room, but a few weeks later He had someone take Eli away. No warning. That morning I woke up. The bed was empty. He said Eli had to go somewhere more suitable. Then he packed up Eli's things like he'd never lived there. I didn't believe it. I knew Eli wouldn't leave me. So I decided to find him. Even if no one else believed me, I kept going. Maria interrupted, voice trembling. Victor had ties to local officials. After the boy's mother died, he filed for guardianship. The benefits kept coming, but only he received them. I reported it 3 times. Never got a response. I was even threatened with reassignment. Nathaniel's hands tightened into fists. He looked over at Eli, still unmoving. Miss Maria, I need those reports. Any records you have. I have them, she said firmly. I'll bring everything. Nathaniel stood. I'll be back. But first, there's somewhere I need to go. Where? Maria asked. To visit my daughter's grave. She once asked me, if I disappeared, would you come find me? He paused, then added, after that, I'm going to the police. Noah watched him go. For the first time in 2 years, someone believed him. Outside, the rain still fell. But inside that hospital room, a small light had been kindled, the light of hope, and a new beginning. I heard the boy's still alive, been locked up right here in this town. A woman whispered over the bakery counter. No way. Victor Lane. That man still donates to the church. Another replied, her eyes filled with both doubt and fear. The morning after a heavy night of rain, the small town still lay under a blanket of cold, suffocating grey mist. Puddles lingered in the narrow streets, left behind by the storm. A heavy gloom settled over everything, as though the very sky was carrying the weight of a secret newly uncovered. The news had spread fast. Eli, the boy missing for 2 years, had been found alive in a basement. People spoke in hushed tones, but the stir was unmistakable, in every glance, every quick look cast over a shoulder. In this town, the name Victor Lane had never been questioned, until now. But Nathaniel Grayson was different. After a sleepless night at the hospital with Eli and Noah, he had made a decision. No more evasions, no more silence. In his hands, now, was a thick file handed to him by Maria Torres, the boy's former teacher. Inside were all the things that had once been ignored: reports of suspected abuse, photographs of injuries, medical records from a doctor, and a written account from a delivery man who claimed to have heard screaming from Victor Lane's basement. These documents had once been buried among financial records under the innocent label of grants from the Victor Lane Foundation. Nathaniel tightened his grip on the envelope and carefully tucked it into his coat pocket. His eyes no longer held the blurry sorrow of a grieving father. They now burned with a cold, determined light. He knew Victor would retaliate. He knew the system had been quiet for too long. And he knew the truth, however painful, might not be welcome. The local newspaper office sat off a side street, tucked behind an old flower shop and a dusty general store. When Nathaniel stepped through the door, Mr. Maxwell, the editor-in-chief, sat behind a wooden desk, nursing a chipped ceramic coffee mug. The middle-aged man, wearing a dark sweater, hesitated when he saw Nathaniel walk in. Maybe he had heard the whispers from the hospital, or maybe he had been expecting this visit. Mr. Grayson, Maxwell began, polite but guarded. I've heard some things, but you understand, the press needs verification, confirmation from law enforcement. Nathaniel didn't answer right away. He reached into his coat, pulled out the file, and placed it on the desk. I didn't come here to listen to excuses, he said. How many bruises, how many screams in the night does it take for you to believe a child was locked in a basement for 2 years? Maxwell looked down at the photos, bruises, cuts, swollen eyes, a gaunt body. He swallowed hard, then shook his head and pushed the file back. Without an official investigation, without confirmation from the police or the DA, we can't publish this. You understand, don't you? We're a small paper. Victor gives a lot to this community. You mean you're afraid? I mean, I'm cautious. Nathaniel nodded, but a cold ache spread in his chest. A child was buried underground for 2 years, and all you're worried about is a lawsuit. He stood, said nothing more, and walked out without looking back. On the way, he called Maria. We need a bigger paper, he said. Someone who's not tied down by local festivals and Victor's charity checks. I'll find someone. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Noah sat quietly at Eli's bedside. Though Eli was receiving care, he still hadn't spoken or opened his eyes. Now and then, he would flinch slightly when a doctor or nurse came near. Noah hadn't left his brother's side for a moment. Linda, a young social worker, arrived to check on the formalities. When she heard Maria describe the search and Noah share pieces of their past, her face went pale. You're saying your Uncle Victor separated you two, lied about where Eli was, and sent you to live with a distant cousin? Linda asked, taking notes as she listened. Noah nodded. Linda was quiet for a moment. She remembered seeing Victor Lane's name in the system once, as a model guardian. But now, everything was different. Maybe, she whispered. The old records weren't deleted. Maybe they're still in the county archive. That afternoon, she and Maria went to the county records center. In a musty basement, lit only by the flickering light from their phone flashlights, they sifted through layers of dust on rusted metal cabinets. They opened file after file, searching patiently, as if unearthing a grave long forgotten by time. Here it is, Maria breathed. A thin file with a faded yellow cover. The label read, Elmwood Elementary School, student Eli Torres, suspected abuse. Inside was a report Maria herself had written. A photo was clipped to it. Eli in a long-sleeved shirt, with the sleeve pulled up to reveal bruises and long scratches, like marks from being tied. There was even a handwritten statement from the deliveryman, describing the time he heard a child screaming from Victor Lane's basement. They didn't disappear, Linda said, her voice flat. They were buried. Under money. The rain had finally let up, but the air still carried the heavy gloom of a dusky afternoon, laced with mystery. A chilly breeze drifted through, bringing with it the gentle scent of wax candles and old paper from the church hall, where a winter charity fundraiser for orphans was taking place. Inside, the atmosphere felt solemn, yet beneath the surface there lingered a subtle, well-polished deceit, masked by warm smiles and generous applause. Soft yellow lights cast a muted glow on the small wooden podium. Standing there was him, the executive director of one of the region's most prominent charitable foundations. He was a familiar face, often seen on television leading donation drives, cutting ribbons at community center openings, and speaking earnestly at town council meetings. To the townspeople, Victor Lane was the embodiment of generosity, a man who had rescued so many unfortunate lives. His speech opened with flowery words of gratitude, slowly transitioning into heartfelt reflections on abandoned children in need of community support. He spoke of responsibility, compassion, and the need to build a brighter future for generations to come. Below, townsfolk nodded in agreement. Some whispered to each other, "He's a good man. Last year, he funded the elementary school library." One elderly woman squeezed her daughter's hand and sighed, "If only we had more folks like him in this town." Victor's smile was flawless, like a carefully worn mask, concealing a heart grown cold and an agenda darker than anyone dared imagine. At the back of the hall sat Chloe, a young and spirited journalist. Her eyes stayed fixed on Victor. His face wore a smile, but his gaze was hollow, like a bottomless well. She took a few photos with her phone, Beside her, Maria Torres stared down at a piece of paper in her hand, a classroom photo from years past. In it, Eli should have been standing next to Noah. But the boy was missing. No one had asked. No one had cared. The pain and helplessness were etched into the teacher's face. As Victor passionately spoke of abandoned children, a deep unease began to stir in Chloe. She had heard whispers, rumors of a missing child from this very town, years ago. And now, Victor's performative speech only heightened her suspicions. That very afternoon, Nathaniel Grayson drove straight to the estate where Victor lived, a sprawling property with bright white fences and perfectly trimmed gardens, all gleaming with a false sense of purity. But it wasn't Victor who came to the gate. It was Lucas, his silver-haired assistant. His expression was icy, his voice dry and rigid, like steel. Lucas was the step-uncle of the two boys. "What do you want?" Lucas asked, eyes unblinking, his tone probing. Nathaniel replied firmly, with no hint of fear. "I want to talk about Eli and about the basement." He didn't mince words. Time was precious when justice was being buried alive. Lucas didn't budge. He stood firm, blocking the entrance, his voice lowered to a near whisper. "There's no Eli. That story ends here." The threat in his words was subtle, but unmistakable. Victor had made it clear. If Lucas didn't keep it quiet, he'd be out of a job. "And if I don't stop?" Nathaniel's voice sharpened, his eyes like blades. Lucas stared at him, long and hard. A flicker of menace lit up his eyes. Then, tilting his head ever so slightly, a gesture heavy with warning, he murmured, "Then don't be surprised if someone gets hurt." The iron gate closed slowly but decisively, as if sealing away every secret and every silent scream behind it. At that very moment, Chloe returned to her desk at the local newspaper office. She got straight to work, trying to piece together the old rumors of a missing child with Victor Lane's speech and the troubling clues Maria Torres had provided. She brought her draft to Mr. Maxwell, the editor-in-chief, but he only shook his head. "Chloe, you know how this game works. Victor Lane is a major donor. Without solid evidence and an official investigation, we can't run this story. You'll drag the paper and yourself into a whole mess." Chloe exhaled heavily, disheartened. She knew she couldn't publish it formally, but her conscience wouldn't allow her to stay silent. That night, she sat down at her personal computer and opened her anonymous blog, a space she had used for stories too sensitive for mainstream coverage. Fueled by outrage and a deep longing for justice, she poured everything she had into the post. She included a photo of Victor Lane at the podium and attached every detail she had uncovered about Eli and Noah. Then she hit publish. Within hours, Chloe's article was making waves across social media. Hundreds, then thousands, of shares and comments flooded in. Hashtags like #Justice for Eli began appearing everywhere. The rumors were no longer quiet whispers. They had become a rising tide of public fury. Elsewhere, in a modest city apartment, Linda, a social worker from the Children's Welfare Department, sensed something was wrong. Her phone buzzed relentlessly with anonymous messages. "Keep your mouth shut if you know what's good for you." A strange car parked across the street every night, headlights glaring straight into her window. Silent, but haunting. Maria, after finishing tutoring that evening, found an unmarked envelope in her mailbox. Inside was a single handwritten line, scribbled in a clumsy hand. "Stop if you want the kids to stay safe." The wave of information spreading online kept growing. Victor, feeling the pressure, lashed out at Lucas. "You didn't do your damn job. You let them dig around," he had screamed over the phone. Hours later, Victor fired Lucas on the spot, threw him out of the estate without explanation. without compensation. Lucas, once protected, now found himself discarded. His fear now boiled into fury. His only weapon, a single recording, the one piece of evidence he had kept, just in case Victor turned on him. Lucas finally made up his mind. He used a prepaid phone to call Maria Torres, the number he'd saved from past parent-teacher meetings. His voice was hoarse, trembling with fear and bitterness. "Miss Torres, this is Lucas. I have something. It's about Eli. It's important." Maria was at the hospital with Nathaniel and Noah when the call came. She spoke briefly with Nathaniel, and together they agreed to meet Lucas at a discreet location. Lucas, cautious and shaken, handed Maria an old recorder. Nathaniel and Maria pressed play. A crackle, then static. Then a man's cold, commanding voice. "He doesn't step outside. Got it? One word and I cut all funding. Shut your mouth." At the same time, former students from Elmwood School began speaking out. A video clip spread like wildfire, featuring classmates recounting Eli's sudden disappearance. In another part of town, Mr. Lester, a retired post office worker, opened a drawer in an old cabinet. He pulled out a small envelope, yellowed with time. No return address. Inside, scrawled in pencil, were a few shaky lines. "I'm Eli. Someone, please help me. I'm trapped." Mr. Lester stared at it, troubled. "I found this in a pile of loose letters, dropped into the public mailbox down the street. Maybe the boy slipped it to a delivery man, or had someone post it for him. At the time, I figured it was just a child's prank, but something about it made me keep it, like I couldn't quite let it go." Now, that forgotten letter had become a crucial piece of evidence, a desperate cry from the dark, finally coming to light. Principal Halvers of Elmwood School checked old records and found Eli Torres's name crossed out. No transfer forms, no parental verification. Halvers admitted Victor had once visited him privately and requested silence in exchange for generous funding. Victor Lane's web of lies was starting to unravel. Those who had once stayed silent, out of fear, bribery, or sheer apathy, were finding their voices. Piece by piece, the truth was coming together, forming a full picture of the crime, hidden for over 2 years. And with the mounting pressure from the public, from the voices once alone but now united, it was clear. A storm was coming. And it was no longer one man's secret to bury. An independent investigative team had been formed, one that bypassed the local town police. That very night, Victor Lane was arrested at his mansion. As the sound of police sirens echoed and red and blue lights flickered against the luxury glass windows, Victor was dining alone. He answered the door with a puzzled look on his face, only to freeze as the arrest warrant was presented to him. "Mr. Victor Lane, you are under arrest on charges related to child abuse, financial fraud, and obstruction of justice." Victor stood motionless. For a moment his face turned pale, but almost instinctively he regained his composure. "I'm afraid there must be some mistake. I'll be calling my attorney. You'll have that right at the station. Please come with us, sir." Victor turned back inside to fetch his coat, still holding the air of a wealthy man inconvenienced by a trivial matter. But once the door closed behind him, that calm demeanor began to crumble. In the back of the police car, he sat in silence, hands clenched tightly, trembling, whether from cold or fear. It wasn't clear. He knew this time things wouldn't be smoothed over so easily. The leaked news sent shockwaves through the public. The crowd split in two. Some refused to believe it, while others erupted in long-suppressed outrage. In the courtroom, Victor appeared in a dark suit, his face unreadable. He walked in like a man wrongfully accused. Outside, large screens broadcasted the trial live. Many citizens, unable to get a seat inside, gathered in groups to watch, discussing each detail in hushed but fervent tones. Victor's defense attorney began, "No one here directly witnessed any abuse. Most of these documents are copies, second-hand accounts, emotional claims, easily exaggerated." Their argument was sharp, carefully worded, aiming to paint everything as a misunderstanding. The prosecutor stood up and placed a thick file on the table. He didn't attack outright, but rather peeled back the mask piece by piece. First came the audio recording from Lucas, played over the courtroom's sound system. Victor's voice rang out, cold and threatening. "He's not allowed outside. One word and I'll cut off your stipend. Shut your mouth." Victor lowered his head, feigning confusion, but his face twitched slightly, and that reaction did not escape the cameras. Next came the testimony of Doris, the corn farm owner who had once denied knowing anything. The prosecutor displayed a recovered text message on the large screen. "I got the $3,000. Don't ask me anything about the kid." Doris stepped onto the witness stand, trembling as she confessed, "I was afraid of him. I just wanted to be left alone." A series of Victor's bank statements were then presented. Every withdrawal, every lavish purchase, every extravagant vacation, none of it reflected his role as a legal guardian for the child. Not a cent had gone toward medical care or education. The entire support fund had been embezzled. In the gallery, there were audible sighs, fists clenched tightly. Faith was beginning to break. Nathaniel asked for permission to take the stand. His voice wasn't loud, but each word rang clear. "You didn't just lock up a child. You locked away his trust in adults. And to me, that's the greatest crime of all." The courtroom fell silent. Victor pressed his lips together, his hands gripping each other until his knuckles turned white. A social worker was called to the stand. A young woman, her face full of regret, spoke quietly. "I once received a complaint from the teacher, Maria. But my superiors said, 'Look into it carefully. Mr. Victor is a respected man.' I stayed silent." Lucas was the final witness. His face was pale, but he no longer looked away. He told it all. Victor split the two boys. Noah was sent to his cousin's place out in the rural area. No documents, no schooling, just chores. Eli was locked in the basement. Whenever the boy cried or resisted, Victor would tell me to discipline him. I did, because I was scared. Sobs broke out in the courtroom. The room was shaken. Victor's attorney remained silent. He understood. There was no way out now. Outside the courthouse, the people stood still. No cheers, no chaotic protests, only a shared moment of awakening. Victor's castle of lies had finally collapsed. Folks turned to look at one another, not with suspicion, but with understanding. The truth had been spoken, and justice for the first time had found its voice. Nathaniel gazed out the window, eyes fixed toward the hospital. That was where Eli was recovering. He whispered, "We can't change the past, but at the very least, we can fix the future." The boy smiled. Nurse Emily's voice was barely a whisper, but it was enough to startle Nathaniel Grayson, who had been standing quietly, leaning against the doorway. He turned quickly to look at Eli. The boy, still thin, still fragile, suddenly had a faint curve at the corners of his mouth, a delicate flicker of a smile appearing on his pale face. It was the first smile Emily had seen since Eli had arrived at the hospital. The room was quiet, almost solemn, but in that small moment, it felt as though a warm breeze had swept through, brushing away the lingering shadows. That fragile glimmer of hope, however, didn't last long. Late that morning, Eli was seized by a violent convulsion. His small body began to tremble uncontrollably. His eyes rolled back, wide and unseeing, while foam began to form at the corners of his mouth. Alarms rang out across the hospital room. Emily moved swiftly, hitting the emergency call button. Doctors and nurses rushed in. Nathaniel grabbed Noah tightly, pulling the boy away from the bed as chaos erupted around them. "What's happening? What's wrong with him?" Noah screamed, panic overtaking him. Emily, trying to steady her voice, said firmly, "We're trying to keep him conscious. He could be suffering from meningitis or severe neurological damage due to prolonged malnourishment and confinement without proper light. We have to get him scanned and moved to intensive care immediately." Noah collapsed to the floor, clutching his head in both hands. Helplessness tore through him. Behind him, Nathaniel rested a hand on the boy's shoulder, grounding him as the cold sound of medical carts and ventilators echoed down the hallway. Eli was kept in the ICU for hours. No one was allowed in. Noah sat outside the door, his face drawn, dark circles under his eyes. He hadn't eaten. He hadn't moved. Every time the metal doors opened, he jumped up, only to be met with silence or vague updates. Then, just before dawn, a doctor finally came out. "He's past the worst of it," the doctor said gently, "but he's still unconscious. It may be days, maybe even weeks, before he wakes up. The miracle is his heart. It's strong. That boy wants to live." Noah broke down in tears, not from pain, but from hope. The delicate thread between life and death had held. The hospital door swung open once more. Nathaniel entered, followed closely by Attorney Daniels. His face was worn with exhaustion, but there was a fire in his eyes. Noah looked up immediately, his voice raspy, his eyes filled with questions. "Well, what happened, sir?" Noah asked. Nathaniel stepped forward and lowered himself to eye level with the boy. His voice was firm, but warm. "Noah," he said, "Victor Lane has been convicted." The room went still. Noah stared in disbelief. A single tear rolled down his cheek, not from sorrow this time, but from relief, from justice. At last, it had been done. He turned to Eli, still lying motionless in his hospital bed, no longer just a victim, but living proof of the truth that had been hidden for too long. "He's going to pay for what he did," Attorney Daniels added, voice steady and certain. "Every bit of evidence, from Lucas's testimony to the buried financial records, even the letters pleading for help, it's all been exposed." Noah bowed his head, lips pressed together, his shoulders trembling. He said nothing, but inside him rose a tidal wave of emotion. Relief, anger, and a deep, aching grief for all Eli had endured. Nathaniel placed a firm hand on the boy's shoulder. "You didn't give up," he said gently. "No one would have blamed you if you had, if you were tired, if you had let go. But you didn't. You found your brother, and you brought the truth to light." A few days later, Maria came and took Noah for a walk to a small neighborhood library a few blocks from the hospital. Eli was still in intensive care, but doctors said he was showing slight improvement. Noah, as he always did, carefully brought along a children's book, the same one he and Eli used to read together. He picked a spot by the window, opened the book, and began reading out loud, slowly and clearly, word by word. Eli wasn't there, but Noah believed his voice would find its way to his brother. A few other children, curious, drifted over and sat nearby. A librarian quietly placed a warm glass of milk next to Noah. He nodded his thanks, and there, with the steady rhythm of a boy's voice who once had no bed to sleep in, a new life began to take shape. The steady chime of the hospital clock echoed down the quiet hallway. This time, it wasn't a reminder of dread. It was the sound of a long nightmare finally coming to an end. Eli had recovered enough to be discharged, and Noah, The little boy who had braved the night alone to search for his brother was now able to smile, faintly but freely, for the first time in many days. They weren't leaving to return to a shelter or a community center. Nathaniel Grayson had made up his mind. He was bringing them home. "This is my home," Nathaniel said as the iron gate creaked open, revealing a modest wooden house, simple in appearance but filled with warmth, "and I don't want it to stay empty any longer." He led the boys through each room, a small bedroom with children's drawings still pinned on the wall, a green bicycle quietly leaning against the hallway, and a bookshelf that still held the comic books Sylvia used to love. He didn't hide his sorrow, nor did he try to erase the memories. Every corner of the house, every detail, felt like a step toward healing. That evening, under the soft glow of warm light, they shared dinner at the same table. Noah cleaned his plate without a word, and Eli, for the first time, ate without constantly glancing around. Afterward, Nathaniel brought out a file folder and placed it gently in front of the boys. "Tomorrow, we go to the notary's office," he said, his voice calm but steady. "I've filed for adoption, but only if the two of you agree." There were no grand promises, no vows of forever, just a simple nod. Noah looked at Eli, then both boys nodded. In that quiet moment, a home was formed, not with bricks or stone, but with trust. The next day, after the legal paperwork was finalized, Nathaniel took the boys to a small lakeside park. He carried with him a worn leather notebook, his daughter Sylvia's journal. Beneath the soft amber light of the late afternoon sun, he sat on a wooden bench and gently opened the time-worn pages. He made no attempt to hide the past. "Sylvia was my only child," he said slowly. "A bright girl, always smiling, and very stubborn." He shared stories of their evening walks by the lake, of the little poems Sylvia used to write in her journal, sometimes clumsy and without rhyme, but full of feeling. One time she asked me, "Daddy, if I ever got lost, would you come find me?" I laughed back then, thought she was just being silly. Nathaniel paused, but a few years later, after a bitter argument, she ran away. I never got the chance to say I was sorry. And then the accident happened. He closed the journal, his hand trembling slightly. The day I found her last letter, unfinished in her desk drawer, it said, "Did you ever come looking for me, Dad?" I sat alone for hours. That question, it's haunted me ever since. He looked over at Eli and Noah, who sat quietly, listening to every word. "And then I met you, Noah. When you asked about your brother, when no one else believed you, I saw her eyes in yours. I knew I couldn't make the same mistake twice." Noah didn't say a word. He simply took the pen Nathaniel offered and opened a blank notebook Nathaniel had given him earlier. On the first page, Noah wrote, "We were not abandoned. We were found." The handwriting was uneven, but firm. He continued, writing as if to his mother, "Mom, if you ever read this, I just want you to know Eli is alive. He's been there for 2 years, all alone in the dark. But now, he's not there anymore. I found him. Just like you always said, we never leave each other." We kept that promise. Noah stopped, taking a deep breath. Eli was sleeping peacefully nearby. A different kind of sleep than before, finally restful. He kept writing, "I know you never wanted us to be afraid, but sometimes I was. I was scared no one would believe me, scared I'd never see him again. I started thinking Eli was just an old memory. But if I stayed quiet, he really would have disappeared." Tears smudged the ink, but Noah wiped them away and continued, "We still have each other. And now, we have Mr. Nathaniel. He didn't run. He helped us when no one else would. He stayed, even when everything was a mess. I think you would have liked him. You would have seen he's like you. Quiet, but always there when it matters most. And finally he wrote, "We have a family now. Not a replacement, but a place to begin again. Mum, I think I've found home." Noah closed the notebook and placed it gently on the table beside Eli's bed. He sat down on the little chair, took his brother's hand, just as he had every night since they were reunited. In his sleep, Eli stirred slightly, his lips moving faintly with unspoken words. But Noah knew. His brother felt everything. And the next morning, when Eli opened his eyes and saw the first page of the notebook, he nodded. No words were needed. Just a single nod. Soft, but sure. After 2 long years, Eli was no longer merely surviving. He was beginning to live. In the center of the town square, morning mist still clung to the tiled rooftops and pine branches, while a small ceremony was being prepared. The atmosphere was no longer heavy like it had been in the days right after the tragedy. Instead, it felt gentler now, full of hope. The sound of hammers echoed in the air, mingling with the scent of freshly cut wood and the sweet aroma of corn muffins wafting from the vendor stalls along the street. Children's laughter rang out like birdsong. On the stone pavement, kids used white chalk to draw cheerful shapes, suns, flowers, stick figures dancing. In one corner of the square, a wooden sign had just been raised. It read, "No child should ever have to knock on the door of despair again." It wasn't just a slogan. It was a promise from the community, a vow born from shared pain. Folks came forward with items from their homes, old teddy bears, tiny shoes, children's drawings, all placed gently into a wooden chest labeled "What Remains of Memory." It was a way to honor the past, but also a quiet step toward healing. Mrs. Doris, the woman who ran the corn farm, who had once turned away from Eli's pain, arrived without a word. She placed a plain white envelope in the box. On it, in shaky handwriting, were the words, "I know I was wrong. I hope the children can forgive me." No one judged her. No one asked questions. And when she rested her hand on the wooden sign, the eyes around her softened. Forgiveness, it seemed, had already begun to bloom. She walked away lighter, as if she'd finally let go of a burden she'd carried for years. On a small stage nearby, Mr. Halvers, the retired school principal, stood quietly at the microphone. "Not all of us deserve forgiveness," he said simply, "but from now on, every child in this town will have a name, a classroom, and a door that's never locked." His words weren't poetic, but they were sincere. And more than that, they carried the weight of true resolve. Down below, Maria Torres held little Rosa's hand, the same little girl who had once helped identify Eli by the birthmark behind his ear. Linda, a worker from the local welfare office, was collecting donation slips for a new fund to support children who had suffered abuse. Off to the side, Chloe, the reporter who had lost her job for covering the case, was quietly taking photographs, not for any paper. This time, she just wanted to capture the moment. A moment of rebirth. Eli stood beside Noah, both dressed in crisp white shirts. Eli didn't turn away from the camera anymore. He wasn't smiling, but he stood tall, steady, no longer shrinking from the world. Noah held his hand tightly, an anchor to keep him grounded in this real, changing world. Nathaniel Grayson walked toward the wooden sign. He said nothing, just placed his hand on the rough grain of the wood and bowed his head. No speech needed. His presence alone, the man who once went against the tide, who chose to listen to a lonely child, spoke louder than any words could. The children kept playing. They drew suns, houses, and flowers. The wooden sign became part of their game. Their laughter echoed through the square, like a melody chasing away the shadows of the past. When the ceremony ended, Nathaniel brought the two boys back to his car. Between them, on the seat, lay a brand new leather-bound journal. Embossed in small gold letters were the words, "Day 1. He asked, "Have you written anything yet?" Noah lifted the journal. On the very first page, in neat handwriting, it read, "We will keep writing, but this time, no one will have to write in the dark." Nathaniel smiled and turned the key in the ignition. The car rolled slowly across the square, driving away from years of pain. In the rearview mirror, he could see the children running under the golden afternoon sun, laughter trailing behind them through the old rooftops. 3 shadows, one tall, 2 small, faded into the light of the setting sun, moving toward a new future, where justice had finally found its voice, and where the children were, at last, heard. There are doors in life that one cannot open alone, because behind them lie darkness, pain, and long stretches of silence. But if someone is willing to pause, to kneel down, and to listen to the faint calling from the other side of that door, then a life might be saved. A broken bond might be mended, and a society might relearn how to love. In the late afternoon, golden sunlight lingered on the treetops in the garden of Nathaniel Grayson's estate. The gentle scent of lavender floated in the breeze, blending with the clear, innocent laughter of children. Nathaniel sat quietly on a bench, his eyes softly closed, soaking in a rare moment of peace. He had never been a father in the traditional sense, but now his heart was full, filled by the presence of 2 little souls playing on the lush green lawn. Eli, though still marked by visible scars, no longer flinched when touched, and sometimes he would even let out a natural, spontaneous laugh whenever Noah told a funny story. Eli's laughter wasn't loud, but to Nathaniel it was the most beautiful sound he had ever heard, a melody of rebirth. Noah looked at Eli with eyes full of gratitude and love. He knew now, beyond all doubt, that his long journey had not been in vain. Every dusty mile he had walked, every word ignored, every tear shed, each of those led to this moment, the moment his brother was finally free and the 2 of them had found a home. Nathaniel remained there, silently watching the children. A faint smile rested on his lips, not one of overwhelming joy, but a gentle smile of calm, of peace after a long and trying journey. It was the smile of a man who had found his purpose in life, to protect the small and vulnerable. The story of Noah and Eli is not just a tale of reunion, it is a lasting reminder. Never stay silent when the truth is being buried. Not everyone has the strength to speak out, but sometimes a look of trust, a pair of open arms, can be the place where a child finds the courage to rise again. Nathaniel Grayson could not save his own daughter, Sylvia, but he saved 2 other children from a similar fate. And while that did not erase the pain of losing her, it transformed grief into action and regret into a noble purpose. In a world where the voices of children are all too easily drowned out, we need more people like him, like Maria, like Chloe, like Linda, and like Noah. They are beacons of compassion and courage, those who dared to stand up for what's right, no matter the barriers, no matter the risk. What do you think? Was Nathaniel right to trust in Noah and to stand up for those children when no one else would? Please share your thoughts in the comments. We genuinely want to hear your perspective. Every share, every reply from you fuels our resolve to continue telling stories that are heartfelt, honest, and deeply human.